Welcome to Motivation U, the podcast. Hello, I'm Bob Ganzak, and this is Motivation U, the podcast, coming to you live from Spurrier's Gridiron Grill here at Celebration Point, Gainesville, Florida, Alachua County, exit 384 off of I-75. If you're going north or south, want to stop, coming by in the evening, great place for food, incredible restaurant. I just took our guest, Jonathan Jarrell, through the museum, and we had some fun there. And so we're inside the coach's podcast room. Coach Spurrier, got to come by here sometime. Talking today about SHRM, leadership, life in different departments and different places that you've worked.
Yeah.
Jonathan Jarrell, you are the HR director for Cone Distributing.
I am.
Ocala, Florida. How long have you been with Cone,
Jonathan? I've been there 6 years. And just to pretext our talk, we have no idea where it's going to go, right?
Right.
So we'll have some fun. Yeah, 6 years. But I've been in human resources for, although I don't look at, 20-something years now.
Jonathan and I first connected through Dale Carnegie. He had reached out to me, or I reached out to him, one of the two. And this is like 12 years ago. And Jonathan is a graduate of Dale Carnegie, and we'll get into some of the really interesting things that he does in his personal life and his business life. Some incredible things that Jonathan's involved in, and extremely humble, because a lot of things that happen in the SHRM world, the Society of Human Resource Managers, right?
Got it.
The SHRM world, Jonathan is very involved in that, and he doesn't always stand up. He had me speak to them many years ago,
yes.
And it was one of my favorite talks that I've ever given was that day. That was a lot of fun. But Jonathan, how did you get involved in HR, and what was the journey to that world?
I didn't even know what HR was in the beginning when I got it. And I worked for a guy. I'm sure we'll get into people that we worked for and good people that build us up in our lives. But at the time, I was a consultant. I did risk management, and the HR director for the company that I was doing consulting with, doing risk management for, was leaving. And the guy that ran the place, his name was Bob.
Yes.
And
wasn't me.
Yeah, right. It wasn't you, but his name was Bob. And he said, you know what, I think you'd be great at this job. You ever thought about doing it? I'd love to see you try it. I'm like, I loved him. I thought, you know what, let me see what I can do. And I got into it, and from there it just took off.
Where was that? What?
In Ocala for Associated Grocers.
You spent the first part of your career in the food business.
Right, absolutely.
What were some of the challenges that you faced? Now, the first one was at the grocers, Associated Grocers,
right.
And then you went to a company in Gainesville.
Yeah, Performance Food Group.
Performance. What were some of the challenges that you encountered as a leader, as a HR director in that industry?
I think beyond people challenges, there's so many challenges in dealing with people. From a food perspective, it's a pennies type business. Otherwise, if you make a mistake, you can't recoup. So let's say you have a driver that drives 300 miles out to deliver product. You don't have the right product. Well, by the time it's been on that truck, you need to deliver whatever you have in that truck. You can't really recoup. You can't drive that truck all the way back, pick up the case of steaks or whatever it might be, and take it back out to the customer. So you have to be effective and efficient all the time. That was some of the challenges that we had.
Well, that's interesting. So if did that ever happen to your team when
Oh,
they
absolutely,
did it?
absolutely.
Do you equip those drivers with the skills to be able to sell them what's on the truck and get them to keep it?
Well, the beauty of the way we did things, the customers would place the order, and then the order would get selected and put on the truck and sent out. But the point was, if our folks internally didn't understand the effective and efficient and do the right thing in the beginning of that order, then the end of the order would always be bad. So it was more getting our folks to understand, we can't recoup from this. If we make a mistake, that is a total profit loss for us.
And then those of us that don't know the food industry like you do, as consumers, you know, we think that, you know, the prices are going up. These people are making millions and millions and
Right.
millions of dollars.
Right.
The margins are small.
Right,
Is that what you're
absolutely,
saying?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. That's interesting. So timing and the way the product is delivered is extremely important.
Sure, absolutely.
So were your drivers, did they work for the company or were they independent
They all work
contractors?
for the company, yep. Everywhere I've worked, they've all worked for the companies, no independent contractors. That's a whole different ball. Not very fun to deal with, because when you work with an independent contractor, they don't care nearly as much as the folks that work for and with you.
What is the biggest challenge to an HR director in 2023?
Right now, that's a loaded question, because there's a lot of challenges.
Okay.
I think there's a shift in mindset of people that want to work and don't want to work, right? But also the biggest challenges is some of the things that we touched on in Dale Carnegie last week, was everything that we do in our business at Team Cone, everything we do in our business is repeatable, right? So you can buy the same trucks that we use, you can buy maybe the same products that we sell, you could buy a building like ours, you can do all the things. The only one differentiator that there is the way we deal with and treat our people. That's the only thing. And, I mean, Bob, you tell me something, but I bet you there's initiatives in your life that you couldn't have got done without working through with people, right?
Not at all.
So there goes the skill set that you need that we teach, or you teach, in Dale Carnegie class, of how to get along with and deal with people. The problem is, from most businesses, still deal with old ways. And what I mean by that is, they hire people, give them a try. If they don't work out, they replace them. And they just keep continuing the cycle. Here's the problem with that, is what happens in your neighboring communities is you just complete the cycle, and that person can take 3-4 months to find a job. They come into your organization, they're there 1 or 2 months, and when they get to the 89th day, because we have a 90-day probationary period, nah, sorry, Bob, you're not working out, we're gonna replace you with somebody else. And then the cycle just continues.
Keep going.
Right? And that's probably my passion, my biggest challenge, is to change that mindset with my HR folks, that the HR department is not about being the HR cops anymore. It's not about writing policies and holding people to it. And I'll tell you a quick story on that. So if you look at the way companies operate right now, if someone makes a mistake, because they have a policy, a black and white written policy, they'll just immediately terminate them. Most folks, even though they've been there 20 years and they have all this time invested in them, have them trained up and ready to go, and they're what I call plug and play in an organization, they made a mistake because the rule book says we have to terminate them, they terminate them. The easiest thing for an organization to do, and I don't know if I'm getting off track here for you.
You keep going.
Yeah.
That's
the
what the
easiest
show's
thing for an
about.
organization to do is to terminate somebody. The hardest thing for an organization to do is help them understand their value that they have. Not only in the organization itself, but outside the organization,
But to
with their
grow them.
family, their relationships, everything that's intertwined and connected. We look at it as if the national average is a 4-member family, okay? So in my mind, not only am I responsible for that team member, and we talk in terms of team members, not employee or associate, team member, we're all part of the team. It doesn't matter what our title is in the organization. But where you look at it, if we employ Bob, we also employ his other 3 family members. Therefore, we have to treat Bob right.
Yep.
And this mindset came from when my son was graduating from high school. And I kind of had to evolve in this. I don't know if it's my age or what, but I had to evolve in this mindset. But it really hit home for me when my son was graduating. And I said, oh my God, he's going into the world now, right? We're going to work for an employer, and I hope to hell that there's an employer that's going to treat him right.
Yeah.
And then I said to myself, well, if I'm not doing right by folks, why should I,
Expect somebody else to be doing it,
absolutely,
right?
So that's kind of where my whole shift started. And thankfully, Dale Carnegie class got me thinking a little differently too.
Well, the people don't realize that when you let somebody go, there's a huge expense to that, because a replacement person, it hasn't, you have to ramp up that person and get them caught up. So that takes time from the people on your team.
Yeah.
And depending on their position, there's usually a loss of business in that, as far as efficiencies in that area. So there is a cost, that is associated with that. And I talk to a lot of individuals who want to just, well, I'm going to let them go. And they don't think of what happens after they let them go. And, to me, the biggest thing is the people themselves. Yet if you just eliminate the people and just do it from a dollar standpoint, you might be cutting a salary, but that increase keeps going, that your cost keeps going for a period of time after that person leaves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's all these different models that, try to come up with what that dollar amount is. But what you cannot put a dollar amount to, you could put a dollar amount to, the overtime or the training costs you put into them, or having to distribute their work to someone else. You could probably really drill into it and come up with a dollar amount of that. But the dollar amount you can't come up with is what you've done to that person psychologically. And their family, how you set that person back.
Yeah, and unfortunately, some people don't care about that.
No. I mean, there's times that of course I've terminated people, but for of course cause, but for the most part, I'll give you an example. So most companies have policies for attendance, right? So if they get so many call-outs or so many lateness, they're going to get terminated because the policy says so.
Right.
And they just let the person rack up those call-outs and then terminate them. Instead of, the call-out is a symptom. What's the root cause? What's causing it, right? Mm-hmm. So is there something going on at home that we can address? Do they need different hours? Is there something happening at home that we could dig into and have the opportunity to show them that we care? And there's the difference in most organizations.
Sure is.
And once you do that, and you start getting these team members, these new folks that work for you, to understand that you care about them, you care, and you're following up behind, and you're making sure that they're successful, and you're following behind and making sure they're on time. And oh, by the way, what's the reason you're not here on time? Can we adjust hours? Do you need me to buy an alarm clock? You know how many alarm clocks I've bought? Or do you need me to call you to wake you up? I'm happy to do that too, to make sure you're getting there in time. And then what you're doing is training that person to make sure that they come along and care about themselves.
And many years ago, and I won't mention the towns or anything because the people are not, it's really not important. I was being transferred from one place to another within a company with a promotion. And there was a gentleman that worked on the team at that new place that I was going to. And the person I was replacing was staying within the company but being elevated to a different market in a different job. And he told me, he said, one of the first things you're going to want to do is let go of so-and-so, fire so-and-so. I'm thinking, why didn't you do it, And he told me all the reasons. And it was, basically hygiene, guy didn't dress right, his hair wasn't proper, it was
a symptom.
Dandruff, body odor, all of these things that he was mentioning. When I met this person, I was like, wow, this dude is talented, really talented guy. And you were mentioning, buying alarm clocks. We went out and outfitted this guy with all new clothes. Yeah. I mean, I was able to barter for the clothes. We bought him clothes, had a talk with him about things like deodorant and, got his hair cut, took him to a hair salon, barber shop at the time. We didn't call them back in the 80s hair salons, guys didn't go to that, But, we got him cleaned up and he became a star.
Yeah.
I remember his
all because you cared.
I remember his wife coming in one day, and I thought, I am in trouble. This lady is really mad at me. And she came in and sat down, and tears coming down her face. She said, "You changed our lives." Now, I didn't think of it like that. It was just, I mean, I have to admit, I saw how talented the guy was.
Right.
And I had to figure out some way that we could keep him,
Sure.
that he could work. But that, those things happen. You do that for people
Yeah.
because you care.
When I speak to organizations, I always teach a method of the care enough to confront. It's like with your wife. If she's making you mad, if there are things going on that are frustrating you, she doesn't know it until you talk about it.
Yeah.
So you got to care enough about that person to confront. And one of the biggest mistakes that new leaders make is that, just exactly that, not care enough to confront.
Mm-hmm.
Something happens, regardless of what it is, and they make up in their mind, oh, Bob's doing this. I keep using you as a reference.
That's all right.
But Bob's
That's all right.
doing this because he doesn't care. He doesn't care about the team. He doesn't know, whatever the reason is. Instead of, when you sit down and have a conversation with him and let Bob know what's going on, A, maybe he doesn't know that he's doing it, or B, there's a reason. There's a symptom behind it. There's a root cause behind it, I'm sorry,
Yes, it is.
of
Yep.
why he's doing it. And
Yep.
once you find out what that root cause is, then you can address everything. But if you care enough about an individual and you do it with love and kindness and care when you do approach the situation, instead of beating them in the head like most organizations would do,
Yep.
then you get a better outcome, always.
Yeah. You're listening to Motivation U, the podcast. We're talking human resources, human relations with Jonathan Jarrell. Jonathan is a SHRM member and here in the state of Florida, and just a great person that I like to talk to find out what is going on in the world as far as employee relations are concerned. You mentioned earlier when we were talking, about cutting back on some of the things. Dollar General. I remember just prior to COVID, where Dollar General was growing like, whew, I mean, they were putting them up all over the
yeah.
place. They were going up, like immediately. And then COVID hit. And getting people to show up to work. I mean, our Dollar General near my house has been closed like a day or 2 days just because they don't have enough employees. And I was just reading that they're going to start just putting pallets out, no aisles anymore, and that people will just get what they want out of the box, and so they only need one employee.
Wow. Good luck to them with that model.
But what is it that you've seen post-COVID that people don't want to work anymore? They don't want to go back to the office.
Some of it, I think, is some of them don't have to. They've changed where they want to work and why they want to work. But we're seeing now that people are coming back into the workforce for sure. We're getting a lot better applicants, if you will, a lot better, more response from folks. So we don't necessarily have the problem on our end because we recruit our folks internal. When we have internal positions, we'll recruit friends. So like begets like, right? So
Yes.
if you become part of a team member or a family, and I hate using the word family in a business because it's still a business. So a team member is much more appropriate, I think. But if you become part of a team member and you start loving what you're doing, I say it this way: you're smiling when you come to work, and you're smiling when you go home from work, and then you start telling others.
Yeah.
And you really, for the most part, don't have a need to recruit all the time. Now, we have onesie-twosies that happen. But that model that you just talked about, you think about it, how you're going to go right to an online model because when you go into a Dollar General, you can't get help and you have a question with something, you're not going to get your answer, help. I don't think that's a good model. I don't think that is at all.
I don't either.
But there's still people out there, Bob. You'll never help me. I'll never believe that there's not people out there. Here's the issue. In my opinion, with what's going on with them, is they're not investing in their people. They're not taking care of their people. And could you imagine being that one guy? Having it all on your shoulders, being that one guy in the store? What are you doing to that guy?
I remember probably last summer, we live in a community that has a Facebook page that they share ideas. And, the people are right outside the side gate is where the Dollar General is. And the individuals are, they care about the place. They shop there and they care about the people that were there. And when the manager finally had enough and resigned, and they closed it down for a while because they didn't have anybody to replace them, and it was all over our Facebook page.
Wow.
Somebody's got to get. So I don't know if the person came back or not. I haven't been in the store for a while. It's just sad that there are opportunities out there, and we're not able to convince the people to take advantage of that.
Well, my opinion is that why would you? Why would you want to work in an organization where they're going to beat the heck out of you, work you as a one-man show there, and you go home defeated every night? Could you imagine coming into that store the next morning? Why would you want to?
Yeah,
You want to be part of something and assimilate to something that's positive. You don't want to be part of something that's negative every day. And you imagine what goes on with the example you just gave with that guy. So he goes home defeated every night. What does that do to his family? Maybe it's just him and a dog. Well, how does he treat the dog? I don't know. These are the things I think of.
Yep.
And we can do that from a community, from a business standard. We can treat people right, do the right thing by people, treat them right, care about them, love them while holding them accountable. You want to be held accountable, I want to be held accountable, so that they improve.
You've worked in law enforcement.
I have.
In interactions. You continue to do that as a side hustle.
Yeah, right.
Whatever you want to call it nowadays. What do you see different in the law enforcement world? Now, you've never been in HR really in the law enforcement.
No.
But as an HR director, you probably look through those glasses once in a while.
Right.
What do you see difference in law enforcement versus the food industry or normal business?
There's a lot of, so way back 1989 is when I got into law enforcement, and things have changed so much since then. And I'll start with the reason why I didn't continue in law enforcement, because I found that everything that you were dealing with from a law enforcement perspective was negative, right? People aren't calling you to come to their house to have dinner with them. They're calling you because, the husband just... Domestic, whatever just happened. Something negative for the most part. Mm-hmm. And then when you have interactions with the public, you pull somebody over, they had a traffic crash, whatever it might be, that was negative. It was always negative for me. And I just felt like that wasn't where my brain was. I wanted to be able to make a difference. While I could have made a difference just in that one incident, I wanted to make a difference on a higher level like I do in HR. I feel like I do in HR. So there's a difference. But the novelty of wearing a gun and badge wears off real quick. When you first get your gun and your badge and your uniform, you think you're all that. And then you quickly learn that people don't do what you tell them to do just because you told them what to do. So talk about using principles of Dale Carnegie, right? When you get I can remember plenty of times being out pitch dark, 3 o'clock in the morning by myself with a group of people in a car. They had the full advantage. So you better know how to talk and how to operate and how to act appropriately, right? Until your backup gets there. Otherwise, you're in trouble. So
was this in Ocala?
Yeah, this was in Marion County.
All right.
Where I started in Marion County. But so you better know how to operate and deal with people. But the question was, what's the changes? And those are the changes, like the novelty of wearing a gun and badge. And then people, there's just a level, not as an entirety, but there's for some reason, and which is probably more political, which we probably don't have time to get into. People just don't have the respect for that profession that they used to have. Now, some of it's driven from, here's what happens is once you have the need and you start lowering your hiring standards, you hire folks that probably shouldn't be in those positions. They turn around and make mistakes, put spotlight on the profession as a whole, and there goes the struggle.
So from an HR standpoint, talking about that last part of what you said about law enforcement, from an HR standpoint, if the wrong person is hired and you have one of those issues that have become so big politically across the country, whose fault is that? Who does, like in a sheriff's office, is it the sheriff that gets nailed for that, or is that, and I say nailed, I don't mean it, from that standpoint, but who should you look at to say you should have seen this?
So there's due diligence that has to happen on both sides. From a sheriff's department perspective, there's a higher level of due diligence that has to happen than in local industry, right, in our business. But at the end of the day, there's always patterns and signs for people. There's always patterns and signs. And I would suspect that most organizations let some of those patterns and signs go because they need people to get the
Bodies.
job done.
They need bodies.
Yeah,
Yep.
the bodies, which is you just led me into something.
Yeah.
So we were having a meeting, and one of our folks says, "I just need the bodies," and I'm like, "We're not a mortuary. We're like they're not bodies. They're individuals, right?
Yeah, I
They're-
hate
they're
that
people.
myself.
I need people.
Yeah.
People are what gets the work done, not bodies. Bodies are.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
happening that way.
But that's the mentality.
Yeah,
And we
I know.
can't, we've got to coach that out of people. I'm sure
Yeah.
that's a big part of what you guys talk about in your SHRM meetings is
Yeah.
how do we change thought process with managers and supervisors as we go down, leads, and as you trickle down through the entire operation.
Yeah.
Back to the sheriff's office, again, is there a level, that somebody says, gosh, I made a mistake there, or,
Yeah, I mean, I would have to think. I'm not in HR,
Right.
But I'll tell you, in my world, yeah. I mean, we address it. John Spence, who's also a Dale Carnegie graduate and lives here, taught me years ago. and
John's
this-
been in that seat twice.
Has he? Good.
Twice, yeah.
Good. Because he's a good man for you to have.
Yes.
But hire slow, fire fast.
Yes.
And once you know you've made a mistake and there's no turning that person around, and they're not buying into the changes that need to happen, you got to make a decision.
You got to.
But don't forget what I just said.
Yeah.
Once you've done all you can as an employer to get that person ready,
And I found in the radio business over the years that part that you just mentioned is a moving target, because like as a business owner in a radio station, you're very you run lean, very lean.
Sure.
So people are doing different jobs. You may have a program manager who has a long leash. You might have a sales manager that has a short leash. Whereas if you flip-flop those things around, the long leash for the sales manager usually helps person develop in sales, and some people just never get it in talent,
Right.
if you know what I mean.
Right, right.
So those should be flip-flop. But how do you judge that as an HR director when you have managers that come to you and say, hey, I think we need to, eliminate this person?
So that's a loaded question, by the way.
All right?
The first thing I do is dig into why. What's the reason why? Have we been talking about, have there been issues in the past? What have the issues been? And have they been documented? But most time when I dig into it, we haven't even had the conversation with the person. I mean, that's like elementary. If I can get anybody listening to understand, do not jump to conclusions. Have a conversation with the person and figure out what's going on.
There's a
Don't
lot
let
of
it go
hearsay.
Yeah,
in
it's all
those things.
hearsay.
Because this person came up and said to this
Yeah.
person, and if another person in that department has the manager's ear,
Right.
and they say, hey, we need to get rid of person 2 and they're person 1,
Yeah.
a lot of times that person says, all right.
Yeah.
And they don't even go in and do the investigation
Wow.
themselves.
And I got a great story about that. So one of the places I worked, so I used to be responsible for 1,800 people in 9 states, right? And so when we would have terminations, HR had to be involved, of course, and I had to validate that what the supervisor said happened, it actually happened. Long story short, we went in to do a termination, sat down with the guy in question who had been with the company about 12 years at the time. Supervisor said his attendance is atrocious. He just doesn't care about the job anymore. We're going to have to let him go. When he came in the room to sit down and talk with us, the guy starts crying immediately and says, I've just been going through some stuff. My son was diagnosed with a terminal illness. I thought I probably cussed more in that situation after the guy said, I just don't know what I'm going to do. And I said, you're going to go home and love your kid, and you let me know when you need to come back. And then I just let those supervisors have it. They didn't even know what was going on.
In a young man's life.
So as a
Isn't that incredible?
supervisor, a 12-year guy, right? A 12-year guy who had given us everything for 12 years. Within the last month and a half, we decided he's no longer part of our company because his job performance went down.
Yeah.
We need to terminate him in their minds. And now they hadn't even had the conversation with him. Wow. That's where I learned you got to dig in. You got to know what the true story is.
We're going to be taking a break. I want to come back to that subject matter because we're talking about employee engagement too. Is how do you connect with those individuals?
Sure.
Coming to you live from Spurrier's Gridiron Grill inside the Coach's Podcast Room. This is Motivation U, the podcast.
We still hear it. The sound of victory. The joy of being part of something great. And while things may not be the same right now, we haven't gone anywhere. If you bleed orange and blue, then Meldon Law is the firm for you.
Jeffrey, what are you doing?
Well, I'm joining the band, of course. Since Meldon Law is the official law firm partner of the Florida Gators, I want to help.
Dad, we're litigators. Let's stick to helping people in the courtroom.
Well, can we still hang out and jam a little bit? At Meldon Law, we won't back down.
Looking for more reasons to celebrate? We have them here at Celebration Point. Enjoy some of the newest additions to our already celebratory lineup, like Dave & Buster's, Les Macarons, and Prime and Pearl. There's always a reason to celebrate. Join us anytime for any occasion. Celebration Point, where Gators come to celebrate.
Welcome back to Motivation U, the podcast, coming to you live from Spurrier's Gridiron Grill. With me today is Jonathan Jarrell, HR Director for Cone Distributing. And as we get back to this, I want to ask you something. Cone Distributing has won like Best Place to Work for a number of years in a row.
Yeah.
What is the secret sauce, and how do you accomplish that? And what is it like to have to keep on, winning the championship? Everybody's shooting for you. You got to keep growing. Tell us about that.
It's challenging. We won Best Place to Work 4 years in a row, and it's based on the vote by our team members themselves. So it's not a third party type. It's through Florida Trend Magazine. And what's interesting is every year over year, we've been the only distribution or blue collar workforce that's won this.
Wow.
And you asked me, how did we do it? A lot of hard work. It started with caring about our people, caring about how the way we operate and how we do things. One of the things that sticks out for me is how you do one thing is how you do everything. So we kind of looked at that model, and we started looking at things in every department. What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? What needs improvement? And once we started doing that, and our team members starting to feel like we cared about them because we were addressing the things that they wanted and needed, then it started to snowball from there, fortunately.
Now, Cone is a family company.
Absolutely.
Doug, I remember we were talking about that the other day. I remember Doug Cone from back when I had Wind FM back in '95, long time ago. And what is the dynamics like working within a family-owned company versus working in corporate America, which you've done that also?
I'll say this. Mr. Cohn's a hell of a smart man, and he recognized that our company was getting bigger than just a family company. While it's still family-run, it's so much bigger. We have 22 counties. We have the largest footprint in the state of Florida for any beer distributor. So when you say 22 counties, that's every convenience store, every drugstore, every Publix, every Walmart, every Sam's Club, everybody that sells our products, which is Red Bull, soda, and a whole heck of a lot of beer, different styles of beer. If a customer wants those products, they have to get it from a store in our 22 counties that we service. So it's a big undertaking with a lot of folks. But to give you a little bit of background on Mr. Cohn, when I was hired by Mr. Cohn, I was an ego. I felt like I wanted to work for a much bigger organization, doing what I used to do and traveling and do all those things. And as Mr. Cohn and I were talking, he says, look, I said, don't hire me if I got to look at spreadsheets all day. Don't hire me if I got to sit in an office all day. I want to be able to affect change and affect the culture and deal with people. And he says, hey, can I talk now? I'm like, yeah, it's your interview, right? You own the business. He says, all I want you to do is protect my culture and keep me compliant. Those two things. That's all I need.
Wow.
And so goes the story 6 years later. So that's what he was looking for, right? He understood that we need to change the way we operated from a people perspective and invest in the folks, invest in the resources, invest in their needs, hire smart people, allow them to do their job, get out of their way, and that's what our folks do day after day after day after day. We have a great group of people.
You know, I've talked, and that's interesting, and I loved what he said, you know, protect my culture and keep me compliant. The protect the culture side of it, for me, being in the people business, I've met, talked to, interviewed, shared ideas with a lot of people that are HR directors. Many times you find that people go into a position because they have to fix something.
Right.
You didn't have to go fix something.
Right.
You know, you wanted to grow it even bigger than
Yeah.
it was, but it was successful
Yeah.
at that time.
Yeah.
When you look at the 22 counties, where do you stretch from what to what?
So Ocala all the way to Tallahassee.
Okay, so it's
Essentially.
north of Ocala.
Yep.
So
And
if you
Citrus
just
County
draw-
as well. So.
Draw kind of a line going
Yep.
north. So Alachua is
Yep, absolutely.
part of
Yep.
that itself. Because that makes things interesting too, is what cities are you working in? And
Well, you think of the
Because-
logistics of that,
yeah.
you know, of how we're gonna service all these accounts, you know.
Do all of your trucks
Yeah.
come back to Ocala all the time, or do you have satellite offices?
Both Ocala and Tallahassee.
So
so
you,
they operate
at
in
both
Tallahassee.
ends you have.
You got it. Every day we're running product from Ocala up to Tallahassee, swapping trucks and coming back down. All the product comes out of our Ocala location,
Okay.
so.
So it's shipped by truck to. It kind of ironic. On the way down here today from my house, I had about an hour conversation with a lady that I used to work with, and just a wonderful person. But she's involved with the Propeller Club, which is involved with the port authorities and the ports.
Oh, okay.
You know, so she was telling me about Brunswick, how every high-end car for the Southeast, you know, Lamborghini, Ferrari, comes in through Brunswick. Do your products come in, you know,
Yeah, they come in from everywhere.
from ports,
Depending
or
on the
is it
supplier.
trains?
So we're primary Miller Coors brands.
Okay.
And then we have all kinds of craft, and I'm not the guy to talk about it, but we
Yeah.
have all kinds of craft beers. So it all comes in from different locations. So we're getting deliveries every single day.
Yeah, that just always amazes me, that how much transportation means. I was driving down here today, and the first thing that hit me is from about exit 390 to here at 384, we were going 56 miles an hour in all three lanes.
Yeah, right.
And I said, geez, Gainesville's turning into Ocala, you know, because
Right.
that's what I always get when I go through there. And, you know, as I got off at the exit, it was just so many trucks, you know, transporting product.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, we don't appreciate, as a consumer, we don't appreciate all the work that goes into getting that can of Red Bull or getting that beer or whatever you might get.
Yeah.
You know, all the work. That's what every distribution company has the exact same struggle, and that is keeping drivers. You know, what's more important? The guy that sells it, the guy that builds the pallet in the warehouse, or the guy that delivers it? Who's more important? Pick one.
Yeah, you really
Because
can't. But that guy
you
that
can't.
delivers it is
Right.
really important.
Everybody has to be involved in that process.
Yeah,
You know?
that's and the stocking of the shelves too. You know, getting your product in the right area on an end cap or
Sure,
whatever it
sure.
is. Those things are all
Yeah.
vitally important too. And you know,
And getting your team member to care enough to put it in the right place, to organize it the right way, to face it the right way, you know, to stock it the right way.
yes,
And you do that with the warehouse, the salesman, we actually have merchandising crew too that goes in the stores and adds product for the accounts, and the delivery guy. They all have to be intertwined and interconnected with each other all day long.
and you know, another thing you mentioned is that, you know, the consumer. A lot of us get upset because there's so many trucks on the highway,
Right.
and we don't realize that, you know, the interstate system was built
For the trucks.
truckers. It
Yeah.
wasn't for us to get to
Right.
our vacation place quicker.
Yep.
Or, you know, really, that wasn't the purpose of those, and we don't appreciate that. How many drivers do you have that work for Cone,
So,
approximately?
If you put everybody collectively, that handled our distribution side from a delivery perspective, close to 100. We have over 300 folks, but close to 100 by the time you put it all together, from Tallahassee to, and everybody that actually touches the delivery method.
So when people are out on the road, as far as a compliance standpoint or insurance, it's one thing to have everybody working within a business, within a facility, and then you have people that are out on the road. What are the repercussions of that as far as costs and investment and mental concern?
Yeah, that's where I was going to. So I think about those. That's what keeps me up at night, right? Worrying about those things, our folks on the road and the things that happen. We can only control what we can control. We can control who's in that truck, what's in the truck, what truck they're driving. We can't control everything else that happens out on the road, right? The dummies that don't drive right and those kind of things. We can't control that. What I can control is how we treat that person that's behind the wheel of that truck, right? I can control how we interact with him, how we treat him or her, what we do for him or her to make him part of the team, and most importantly, set them up for success for their day. We do things like, no one's ever left on alone. So if a driver delivers product, there might be a merchandiser that comes behind him and puts it up. There might be a sales guy. There might be anybody from
Somebody
leadership
helps them
that's
or
going.
whatever.
Yeah, because we don't want them out there all day long struggling. We want to get out there and help them. I call it SWAT team. Just go in and bust it out. Look, if we're in the market compared to our competitors, it's my goal, even if we're not wearing our shirt with our logo on it, that somebody can see us together and they will know that's Team Cone.
Yeah,
That's
good.
not the competitor. That's Team Cone, and they'll know it by, I call it swagger. We have just a different walk in the way we carry ourselves, and it's a pride, and it's a not only a pride factor, but it's the fact that they know that they're working for a company that gives a darn about them.
That's
Another method that we use is like, and our folks know this, no one person in our organization can terminate someone, right? So if your supervisor gets mad at you and emotions take over, you're not getting fired.
There's a process.
Yeah, it's a process, right?
That-
And I'm part of that process, and I'm probably the last conversational piece. But there's so many other people that go into that decision. So it's looked at from a holistic view of what's going to happen with that person. Maybe we change it. Maybe we change the role. Maybe whatever it is. But at the end of the day, people aren't coming to work every day worried about they're going to lose their job.
That's interesting. Going back to the vehicles out on the road and different things, I ran into a situation that I had never run into before in my broadcast career. That happened in Lake City, in Columbia County, where one of my disc jockeys was out in the station van going to a remote and got ran into by another vehicle, basically sideswiped. And the insurance company just wanted to pay it. I wanted to look into it a little deeper to see what happened or who was at fault. I wanted to get more data from it. And my disc jockey was telling me, he said, Bob, they ran into me. I mean, I saw their eyes, and they turned and ran into me. And that's what they were doing, is they saw a radio station. And when we did some background, I had an attorney friend of mine do some investigating on it. And these people had like 6 or 7 of these type of suits against companies, Do you ever run into that?
We run into all kinds of things. In my prior career, I ran into a lot more because of different states, different opportunistic folks, and there's methods that we have to discover those things. So there's cameras in vehicles in a lot of vehicles, there's GPS systems that people use, that distribution companies use to figure those things out. And there's way more smarter people than you and I that do those accident investigations. But typically, if someone's going to be opportunistic, it's discoverable. It's easy to figure it out. But the problem with that is we have 8-10 hours a day to figure that out, where they have 24 hours a day to figure out how they're going to
do it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But again, remember I talked about patterns. For the most part, people don't wake up trying to be, game the system.
Yeah.
And if you're a game the system type person, it's easy to find out if you are or not, just in the way you operate in your day to day.
Bothered the heck out of me that the insurance company settled with these people for
Yeah.
$5,000. But it was funny after the fact, the attorney that we had hired that had helped me, she told me, she said the only reason we settled was because that attorney needed his fee. He spent a lot of time on this case for them, so he got the entire $5,000.
Yeah,
People didn't get anything.
that's
So
usually the way it works,
I'm
too.
all right with that. I'm going to shift gears for a second here. And we didn't talk about this up front, so if you do not want to discuss the subject matter, I understand. Your son, AJ, how old? You mentioned that he's out of high school, he was working and everything else. How old is AJ now?
Too old for him. He thinks he controls everything, but he doesn't control nothing. I'm still his dad. So he is 20. He'll have a birthday on April 2nd. Getting older, 25.
He'll be 25.
Yeah.
So, and he was a foster child with you?
Yeah,
How did you connect with?
I'm probably going to get in trouble for talking about this, but I'm going to talk about it.
Who's going to get
him,
you?
but that's all right.
Well,
I'm still his dad, so
Yeah.
No, so it's a long story short, but AJ was in 13 different homes when I met him. It was almost, I would call it like a Big Brother type program, right? Where we kind of just meet and see if the relationship goes well. And the relationship went very well. And he's now my son, and he's my pride. He's what I work for and what I do. At some point, he's going to be able to inherit whatever I might have, and hopefully it sets him up. But here's the interesting thing, and I say that tongue in cheek, but I went into adopting AJ for the purpose of changing his life. I didn't know it was going to change mine, right? And it probably changed mine more than it did his, And the whole issue with the adoption system is, if someone doesn't care about these kids, who will? And the struggle that really gives me problem, and I wish I could change it, I wish I knew who, and if you know somebody to connect me with, I'd love to be part of it, is when kids are in the foster care system, at 18, they are cut off, done. Could you imagine that? You have no family, no support, no nothing, all because you just turned 18. You're still not grown at 18, right? Fortunately, my son, didn't experience that. But wow, could you imagine that? With what's going, that's a whole different direction, probably a whole nother podcast of what to do. But could you imagine being 18 years old, having no family support, maybe just your friends,
Maybe not even knowing who your family is.
or not even knowing who your family is, being cut off by the state system that was there, put in place to protect you and take care of you, you're done.
Yeah.
It's the same process we were talking about from a workplace. These people that spend 10 or 12 years in an organization, make a mistake, maybe, and get kicked out of the organization. And they have nothing. Nothing.
How old was AJ when you first
6.
connected
He
with
was
him?
6.
6.
Yeah.
So he's been with you for 19 years.
Too long sometimes. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I know. I saw the post on Facebook last week that he gave love to his dad,
Yeah, he
which
loves
was
me. He loves me. He better, because I think that's because I whipped his butt when he was younger.
yeah, right. Right.
But the thing I love about my son is that he understands the opportunity that he's got and been given, right? And he's taken hold of that, and he's made something of it. Instead of, I was having this conversation with somebody that had some life issues, of living in that. Well, I'm a foster kid. I can't have, or I can't do, or, he's taken a hold of his opportunities in life and made something of it. And that's the people that you have in your organization. One thing that you got to understand, these folks that come into your organizations, they all come with baggage. AJ had baggage when he came to me. I probably had baggage when he came to me. But you have to live with the baggage. You have to understand how to work through and around that baggage. And the sooner you do that, the sooner you become to an agreement, the sooner your relationship grows, and all these things take place in life, right? But from an organizational standpoint, when you hire somebody today, we started a podcast with what are the challenges. I would say that's the challenge. When you hire somebody today, they come with baggage.
Yes.
And you got to accept them for the baggage. You got to accept them for who they are, how they look, who they date, who they met, whatever, all these things that go on in personal life. You all have things going on under the surface that we can't see.
Yep.
And the sooner you know what's going on under the surface, the quicker you know how to operate and deal with that person.
One of the things that I see as in personal relationships and business relationships, we go through a dating process in personal relationships, and we kind of go through a dating process.
Yeah, it's the 90-day,
and hiring people.
Yeah, right.
Even before the 90 days, when you're recruiting somebody or you start interviewing somebody, you hire them or you start dating them for certain reasons, and then immediately, once the thing is connected, the 90 days are over, you try to change them.
Right. Yeah.
And I always had a philosophy that I always told my team this, everything in radio was hire talented people and let them be talented.
Yeah, that's part of the problem.
Yeah, hire talent, but we hire talented people, and then we try to change them to make them conform to something else that they're not.
Right.
And then we wonder, why in the heck, they're struggling.
Yeah. It's the same thing, like if Mr. Cohen would, like what we talked about, like if he said, JJ, you got to sit over there and do spreadsheets all day. That's not who I am.
Yeah.
That is not my strength. I am not an office guy. I like to be out, and that's the other thing I was going to tell you about our model is like, if there's something going on with one of our folks, I'm going to them. I'm not making them come to me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting in my car, and I'm going to go out, and I'm going to meet with them, and I'm going to find out what's going on, the root cause of what's going on. And that one shift is what shows our people that we care. Just going out, we call it out of the market, just going out and caring enough to confront the situation, have a conversation about it, talk about it, get it off our chest, their chest, understand what's happening, and then figure out how we can back into fixing the problem for the people instead of how can I get rid of this guy?
Yeah.
You
And
know.
the other thing that goes along with that, in my opinion, in that philosophy, JJ, is that when you go to their office, when you go to where they are, you're on their territory.
Absolutely.
Which, as a business owner or a manager, it might put you in a more vulnerable position. Yet, if you're really intended to help that person grow, it's okay to be more
Well,
vulnerable.
I'll say this, I love being vulnerable
Yeah.
because it's about the heart.
Yep.
And if
That's
I can connect with the heart,
transparency.
listen, if I connect
You
with
bring
the
them
heart,
into your office, all of a sudden it's like they're, tightened up. They're,
Oh, yeah.
I'm being called to the boss's office,
Yeah.
When you go out and visit them, it's like their first reaction always is uh-oh, what's wrong?
Right.
And then when they find out that there's nothing wrong and you do it 2, 3, 4, 5 times,
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, hey, JJ's here. Come on,
Yeah, right.
Good to see you, man.
Yeah.
It changes.
Yeah. But what I was saying, when you connect with the heart, they give you the hands and the brain. Right? Does that make sense?
Yep.
You connect with the heart, the hands and brains are now part of the organization.
Follow that.
Yeah. And the other thing I was going to say is like, if you're going to do a corrective action, we call it corrective action, not disciplinary action or write-up.
Yeah.
It's corrective action because you're trying to correct the action. Well, just picture this. You come home with the corrective action slide it across the table to your wife and say, honey, that lasagna you made last night was terrible. I need you to read and sign this here that you won't do that ever again, right? Or if you go take her to dinner and have a conversation and flip the script and talk about what you like and don't like, or right?
Yeah.
And it just sets the tone different,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I thought your little chat with Josh Vaughn. Josh Vaughn is a gentleman who keeps soon to be all of Celebration Point clean and Chinese entrepreneur. We've talked about Josh. He's been
Yeah.
on the show with me before. But I thought your talk to him before the show about little boys was spot on.
Yeah,
And I tell
yeah,
you.
yeah.
But that's what you're talking about right there. Is instead of
Listen.
criticizing people and condemning them and saying, "Hey, this is what you did wrong," there's a way to approach that.
You never get anywhere with criticism. Dale Carnegie, 3 C's,
Yeah.
right? And I love to talk about these when I speak. Never criticize, condemn, or complain. And when you start focusing on the positives of people, they will repeat the positive. Now, you can beat them over the head and complain about the negatives, and it will not work. Trust me. And the best way you can learn that is through your parenting.
Yeah.
Never criticize, condemn, or complain. Praise your children for what they do. Let the little stuff go.
And that's an amazing way to look at it too. Is not enough of us do that on a daily basis, or we don't apply the things that we learn in maybe business to our family lives
Right.
because that's separate. I got to keep business and they're relationships.
Right.
You build relationships in both places.
Yep, absolutely.
It's an amazing thing to do. We have a few minutes left here. One of the things that I really wanted to ask you about, and we never got to that, but what were the foundations of your leadership philosophy, like where you grew up, and who were some of the people that influenced your early years?
I've been very, very fortunate in my life, very fortunate. And I was raised by my grandparents, so I got some of that old school mentality, right?
Ocala area?
Yeah,
or?
no, up in Michigan, but I got some of that old school mentality. But I'm calling it old school.
Right. We've known each other for 12 years. Why don't you ever tell me you were from
Maybe you
Michigan?
didn't listen. Maybe you didn't listen. Maybe that's what it was. Actually, it connected with me when we were at Dale Carnegie class the other night when you said you were in Detroit. So, I didn't know that about him either. So we need to talk. But what happened was as I went through life, through high school and college days, and when you get into the workforce, you get opportunities from people. And if you don't take those opportunities, you're never going to know what you can or can't do. And so I've been very fortunate where people cared about me, cared enough to confront, took me under their arm, took me under their wing, if you will. One of those guys is John Wilson, who I used to work with here locally. The guy would beat the hell out of me when I made a mistake. Not literally, but but when I did something right, he made sure everybody knew about it. And the thing I like most about him is he never held it against me. So if you made a mistake, when you talked about it, that was the last it was ever going to come up. It wasn't going to come up within a gotcha moment in a review or an opinion down the road. It was gone at that point. And that's one thing I learned mostly is let's talk about it, get it done, but it's over with. You can't keep beating people over the head if they make a mistake, holding it against them for years to come.
The past is one of my kids probably they're older now, but they get tired of me saying these things. Is your heart lives in the past and your mind lives in the future.
Right.
The only thing that really solidifies you is your feet are grounded in the moment. They can't go forward, they can't go backwards. Yep. And if we can work hard as humans to get our heart and our mind more in line with our feet, to living in that moment and appreciating what it has. And yes, you want to learn from your past and you want to set goals, but the only thing you can do is what's going on right now.
Yeah,
right. My kids are so tired of me saying that, but that's Dad,
But I learned from him, he was the guy that taught me you got to care with your heart. You got to care, you got to care. You've never been in someone else's shoes or situation. Life is about circumstances and choice, right? We can't control the circumstance. We can only help people make the right choice. Yeah. And once we help people make the right choice, help them see their value, they start making the right choices, everything opens up for them in life. And he was that guy that taught me, don't be the rule-bound HR dude. Yeah, there's rules. Okay, there are. And you have to have those in business.
And you have to stick
by
those.
But you can also lead with your heart. And when you lead with your heart and show people that you care, that's what gets people to see their value and allows them to grow in their personal lives.
1 minute, magic formula talk. 1 minute, magic formula talk, JJ. You know what that is? Dale Carnegie words.
You might have to remind me.
Tidbit of advice to kind of sum up what you talked about here today.
I think I just said it. I think at the end of the day, we're all going to be, let me say it this way. At your death, you're not going to worry about the gifts or material things that you received. At your death, you will worry about those loved ones that you leave behind. And you will care most about those things, not material things. And what is the legacy that you want to leave with people? What is the legacy you want to leave in people's minds about you, about Bob Ganzak? Or what is legacy, right? Mm-hmm. And what is the thought that you want them to have? And then treat them that way so you can solidify that thought in their mind about you. Specifically in the workplace organizations. So that when they're out in the market, when they're out in the world, they're talking about your organization, about how great you are, not how terrible you are. If I was to say to you, tell me about your best boss and worst boss, the first one you're going to want to talk about that worst boss because of the pain that comes up.
Yeah.
But what if we could flip the script and say, tell me about your best boss and worst boss, and you said, let me tell you about my best boss, I don't even care about that worst boss.
We were having that discussion with the lady I was mentioning earlier that we were talking about. We both worked for an individual that we just sit there and laugh at now, and that's the way I like it. And both of us feel the same way. I think Carnegie has a lot to do with that.
I think so too.
Because you really start doing the best you can in those stress principles. But it's been wonderful having you on here
Appreciate
today.
you.
We'll have to do this again sometime down the road and just discuss that and talk about Michigan, what our connections are.
Love it.
Appreciate it. This Motivation U, the podcast, coming to you live from Spurrier's Gridiron Grill. We'll be back here next week, 11 o'clock Thursday, which will be, that'll be the 16th. Thank you very much for joining us. See you then.